This is the Nikolai S16. It's a long travel enduro bike, complete with one of the hottest e-bike systems on the market right now, the Pinion MGU, a combined motor and gearbox all in one. It's complete with a removable 720 watt-hour or 960 watt-hour battery. This e-bike with its motor and gearbox unit has a Gates carbon belt drive. It completely deletes the traditional chain, cassette and derailleur and moves all of that weight into the centre of the bike and down low. The MGU has 12 gears, it's virtually maintenance free, it's got 85 Nm of torque with electronic shifting. And since we're seeing more and more of these gearbox systems appear right now, I thought it'd be worth sharing my opinion of my own bike that I bought and built up last year. Is this the future of drivetrains? Well, some say that if you were to design an e-bike motor system and drivetrain from scratch, you'd never choose a derailleur-based system. We've just done it that way because it already existed. But if you were to start with a blank slate, a drivetrain and motor for a mountain bike using modern technology, surely it would look something like this. Last year I bought my own Nicolai S16 frame set, complete with Pinions MGU system, and built up my own bike. The frame is wonderfully engineered, it looks robust, strong, and seems like there's a ton of thought gone into maximising the strength and longevity. I also wanted to use the bike as my test bike for new parts, so you'll likely notice some different parts across the video. If you're curious, this is how you maintain, degrease and lube the belt. You just clean it with water. So how's the bike been for me? Well, let's cover it in more detail. So first of all, let's cover the Pinion MGU. And firstly, because there's two parts to it really, there's the shifting and the actual motor, the e-bike performance. So first off, let's cover the shifting. Well, it's electronic shifting. It's super quick to actuate. It's way quicker than most of the electronic systems, if not all of them, out there on the market. Some shifts you don't even notice because it's so quick and so quiet. Now I've covered this in previous videos, but there is a clunk between gear 4 and 5 and 8 and 9 where it kind of moves like a double shift, and you can notice it, especially if you're pedaling and shifting between those two blocks, because you get a little bit of like crank sag. The crank moves slightly, which you don't normally get on traditional derailleur-based systems. But shifting under load, shifting when you're cruising, shifting when you're at a standstill, all of this is brilliant. In fact, I love the shifting performance of this bike. You can hear the noise of the shifts, it doesn't bother me at all, but you can hear it, it's not silent. I love the fact that you can stand still and shift. You can just, when you're stopped on the side of the trail, shift into a harder gear, shift into an easier gear. When you're cruising down the trail, you can coast along and you can see a corner coming up, shift to an easy gear, all electronic, it does it, and it will shift without you having to move the cranks at all. I have tried the auto shift, I didn't like it, I've got to be honest, it shifts just based on what's happening in the moment. It can't predict what's going to happen because it's a reactive system, not a predictive system. So when you are manually shifting, you're preemptively shifting based on what's going to happen up above. Obviously this is just a bike and it's just reacting to what's actually happening in the moment. So unless I'm cruising up a fire road, I basically turn auto shift off. Now you can turn it on and off easily just with holding down one of the triggers, and it will activate auto shift, so you don't need to get into an app and do anything like that. You just hold the button down for about 8 seconds or something and it activates auto shift, and it's the same to turn it off. So the shifting performance is awesome. I really enjoy riding the bike with the Pinion MGU shifting, the smart shift system. Yep, there are a couple of clunks between 4 and 5 and 8 and 9, but you never ever have to worry about anything going out of alignment. There's no mech that's hanging off to hit. Turn the bike on and it shifts crisp on day 1 and day 200. It is just perfectly shifting all of the time. Now, I am not against regular derailleur systems. I have bikes with them. I think they do a great job, but they do really need constant maintenance. Even the latest Axis stuff, I find that I have to do that micro shift thing to get it to, it doesn't always work perfectly. It always seems like gear 3 I have an issue with. And because of the mechs hanging off, if you've watched any of my videos and podcasts in the past, you'll know that it doesn't take much to move that derailleur cage. You glance it on a rock or a root and it can put it out of alignment slightly. And I found that that can really ruin the shifting performance. On this, you don't get that. There's nothing hanging off the back. There's nothing to go out of alignment. It just works all the time and every time. And the gear ratio actually is 600%. So I think SRAM is 520% on their Eagle. This is 600%. In gear 1, the ratio is so crazy low, you can almost rock crawl up very, very steep climbs. Now, if I move on to the actual motor performance of the MGU, it's claimed to be 85 Newton meters. It's actually 160 Newton meters in gears 1 to 4, which is incredibly powerful, incredible amount of torque, I should say. So gears 1 to 4, it offers like almost that slow rock crawl. You're spinning quite fast and it's just moving the rear wheel at a kind of slow speed, but you're able to get up very, very steep stuff with that 160 Newton meters. However, it's really noisy in gears 1 to 4. Now, I don't know if that can be solved in a future version. Maybe they can change the gear material inside, but it's one of those things that does irritate me on the bike. Now, gears 1 to 4 actually are almost like a 52, 54, 56 on a cassette. So you don't find yourself using it that much because it's one of those kind of super steep climbing type of gears. And actually you can cruise around in gear 5 quite a lot. And it's much, much quieter from gears 5 onwards. Now, the motor power is, I would say, matching the Bosch 85 Newton meters in the rest of the range. In 1 to 4, it does feel more powerful. In the rest of the range, it feels similar. And there are some characteristics that they've tried to introduce, whilst good and not perfect. The overrun they've put in recently gives a little bit of overrun. It's not quite as smooth and predictable, I don't think, as the Bosch. Sometimes it cuts out quite quickly. And actually on a steep climb once, I actually stalled and went over on the side because I was expecting it to give me that overrun to kind of propel me a bit further up the climb, and it just cut out really quickly. So whilst it does have overrun, it's just kind of like a small amount, and I would prefer to see a little bit more overrun, a bit like the Bosch 1.5 meters or even 2 meters in there. And the other thing I've noticed is it does take a little bit of pedal input, crank rotation to get the motor started. You have to kind of give it like maybe 10 degrees of rotation, and then the motor kicks in. So when you're starting on steep climbs, it does feel a little bit harder to actually get it going, get the momentum you need to kind of propel you up the hill. I prefer it to engage much, much quicker. Now, there is a little bit of float in the cranks. If you watch me spin it around, there's a little bit of float. There's definitely more float in it than most other motors. Now, this does actually have some benefits. It's a little bit like an O-chain on a bike that gives you less chance of that kind of pedal kickback when the rear suspension is going through its travel, because you're kind of in between that floating point when your pedals are level cruising down the trail. So actually, I thought that might bother me, but it doesn't. If you partner it with a higher engagement rear hub, like a 56-tooth DT Swiss, it kind of almost balances it out. But I actually think that the pros are outweighing the cons on this, because the downhill performance of the e-bike that I'll come on to in a bit is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So the Pinion system overall is an amazing, incredible first go, really. It's a version 1 of an MGU, a motor gearbox unit. And, you know, you've got this 4.1 kilo motor. It removes around 900 grams of weight from the back with the cassette and the derailleur. Heavier maybe if you've got axis and a lower end cassette. Removes the chain, removes the need for maintenance, removes the risk of hitting the derailleur, as I've already covered, and it just simplifies everything. I can get this bike out muddy, dirty, and don't have to faff around with like cleaning, lubing, any of that stuff that is part of mountain bike culture, really. It's part of what we do. But when that doesn't exist anymore, it is really nice. Honestly, it's a great thing to live with. Like, you can just put the bike away, plug it in, charge it, and take it out the next time. There's no faff whatsoever. But they do recommend a little bit of maintenance, and that is just cleaning it with water. There are some improvements I'd like to see, especially to the controller. It's quite bulky and dated looking, and I don't find the buttons very easy to use, especially when riding the bike on trails. It feels quite soft and not very tactile. I added some lights for winter riding. I do like the simplicity of running the lights off the e-bike battery, and I can just turn them on and off from the bar controller. Very neat. So I've ridden this bike in the UK winter. I've not done a huge amount of miles. I've done 400 kilometers, which is not massive by any means. It is by no means a long-term test, but British winters can be pretty harsh, pretty wet, very, very muddy. And 400 kilometers on this has, I think, given me a good understanding of how the bike and the motor in particular performs in a British winter. And so far it's been flawless. Like I said, it just works. The one thing I have to bring up is the battery life. Now in this is a 720 watt hour. If you look on the battery description, it's a bit less than that. It's about 680 when you do all the maths. I don't know why it's 720. It's nominal versus, I don't know, it's a little bit confusing how batteries are rated. But if I look on the sticker, it says about 679 watt hours. And I don't know if it's because it's winter and it's cold, but I'm not finding I'm getting as much range on this. I reckon it's about 10 to 15% less than I might get on a Bosch 750. Again, it's been quite cold. Range tests are pretty difficult when it's different temperatures, different conditions, all that kind of stuff. But it just feels to me like it's not quite as efficient. It's got a gearbox, it's got all that shifting inside, so maybe that's contributing to the extra use. So could I live with it? Yes, I could actually have this motor system as my only, I would forgo every other traditional drivetrain for this system, like 100%. If I had to choose one system and it was on the right bike, I think I would go with this. I'd like to see bigger batteries. In fact, you can get a 1,000 watt hour battery. I didn't choose that when I bought the bike. Maybe I should have done, but I could live with this as the only drivetrain system I had. Sadly, the bike uses a key to release the battery. Now, keys are okay if you're not forgetful, but I am, and I lose it or forget it. So it'd be good to see an Allen key release, like we're seeing on lots of e-bikes these days. So let's cover the bike, the Nicolai S16 MGU. Now I tested this, I did a partnership video with Nikolai last year in Finale Ligure. And I liked the bike so much, I contacted Nikolai and said, I'd like to buy one. I'd like my own personal one. And part of that was I was very curious still about the Pinion MGU. And the bike performance was amazing in Finale, those enduro style trails, super rocky, pretty gnarly. And it just performed brilliantly. So I said to them, look, I want to buy one. I'll just buy a frame set only and build one up. And I got it in, and it is an absolute thing of beauty. I think the raw aluminium look is fantastic. If you get a scratch on it, you can just rub it down. They send you a little kind of pad that you can just rub it down. So any scratches, like I got one from my rack actually, where I use it on the back of my car. And you can see that it kind of has has marked it, and it normally does it on paint on bikes as well. With paint, unless you've got an Invisi frame, you're stuck with a mark on it, but this, you just rub it off. It brings it up brand new again. It's pretty awesome. Now the frame is big, it's burly, it's chunky, it's made from 70/20 aluminium. The welds are massive, absolutely massive. It just screams like, it's like the G-Wagon of e-bikes. It looks burly, and I reckon it will last years and years and years. It just looks like an absolute beast. The welds on it are huge. It's just a marvel of construction, really. And I've built up quite a few bikes from just the frame set only, and this is so easy to work on. It's easy to build. I love the fact that the bearings got double sealed bearings. It's got 2 bearings on each kind of pivot, and they're completely sealed. They've got like a cap with a sealing around it. So I think that this is one of those bikes that is built to last. And look, it is not light. This entire build here is one of the heaviest e-bikes that I've tried. This weighs like 26 point something. It's all aluminium. It's got downhill tyres on it, gravity tyres on it, big dropper post, and nothing carbon. The wheels are alloy, bars are alloy, and it's 26 point something kilo. For an aluminium bike, 170 travel on the front with the Öhlins and 166 on the rear with the Öhlins coil. You know, it's not light, but the way that it handles that weight is remarkable because it does not feel heavy at all. And I know people say that about heavy bikes, but because the weight is so low and so centered, that 4.1 kilo MGU is like right down there, and it's right center of the bike. The rear end on it feels crazy light, and the BB is fairly high. It tips into the corners quite well. But it's not a light bike, and I think that puts a lot of people off this system. But it's a strange one because you have to ride it, and that is quite hard in lots of regions because there's not lots of test places. There's one in the UK called Geometron. They're in Wales. They can give test rides, but it doesn't feel like a 26 kilo bike. The reach on it is 520, and the chainstay is 455. It's got a fairly high bottom bracket height. Actually, the Geo, I love the Geo on this. It's quite a progressive bike, I would say, because mine is only a large, and it's 520 reach. There's an XL and an XXL above that. So if you're a tall person, this is probably the best e-bike you could choose. The chainstay is fairly long, and in a world where most e-bikes are getting really short rear ends, they're quite unbalanced in their taller sizes. So if you're looking for a bike that's proportionally sized, definitely this. It can run 29 or 27.5. I tried it in 29 in Finale, but this is a 27.5. They give these little kind of chips, flip chips, not even flip chips, it's called a mutator, and it extends the rear triangle somewhat, so you can fit a 27.5 rear wheel in it. And I went to 170 travel. It's rated to 180, but I put a 170 fork on it and a coil on the rear, and honestly, this handles so incredibly well. The rear, the way that it moves through the travel is like no other e-bike I've ever felt. So when you're cruising down a techie trail, number one, it is amazingly quiet. You just hear the tyres on the dirt. That's it, nothing else. No chain slap, no motor rattle, nothing, just tyres on the dirt. It's the closest, probably quieter than a regular pedal bike because there's no derailleur slap or chain slap. And the other thing is the suspension is so free to move through. The suspension curve on it, it's quite progressive, so the first part of the stroke is so free and so supple to small bumps. It's especially with the coil, that horse link design just works beautifully well. And like I said, it's the most buttery smooth and bottomless feeling suspension of any e-bike. It is superb at reacting to small bumps. It ramps up nicely near the end of the stroke. I've never ever bottomed it out. I don't think I will be able to because of the progressivity of it, even with a coil. And it is just a remarkable handling bike. The weight could be an issue if you lift it. It's quite heavy to lift into the stand. It's quite heavy to put on the bike rack when you're getting over gates and things. But most full power e-bikes that are built with a burly spec are like 23 to 24 kilos. So as a percentage increase over that, it's like 10% heavier-ish. So the total like system weight of you and the bike is not, it's not massive. I think we do put a lot of focus on weight of e-bikes. And when you make them so light, they just, there's got to be compromises somewhere, whether it's frame material and frame cracking or snapping, or lightweight, light-duty components that just aren't going to last. I don't think this bike, other than the weight, has any compromises. I think this is just built to last. I mean, the gearbox doesn't need any maintenance for 10,000 kilometers, and then it just takes a 10-minute oil change. So this is a bike that I think is built with longevity in mind. If you get a scratch, you just rub it off. If you need to service it, you have to wait 10,000 miles before you have to do anything. You just rinse the belt off with water to maintain it. Now, I've only done 400 kilometers on it, and I'm sure there's people out there that will say, like, that's not a long-term test, and I agree it's not. It's a short-term test over a British winter. But, and I'm sure there'll be people that might have had issues with the MGU, but I'm just giving you my personal experience on it. But I also think this bike is built to last. I think it will last me a long time, and I think that that's the type of thing that we need in this industry. We need bikes that last and don't crack, and, you know, shit happens, bikes fail, parts fail, but man, they're not cheap, are they? So if they can last as long as possible, I'm all for that. So in conclusion, I love this Nicolai S16 MGU. I think that I could have this as my only bike. That's part of the reason I wanted to do it. I wanted to see if I could live with this, and yes, I could. Yes, it is not perfect. It's noisy in gears 1 to 4. I can put up with it because all of the pros far outweigh that. I love the simplicity of it. I love the electronic shifting. I love the suspension performance. I love the look of the bike. It looks like a G-Wagon. It looks like you could chuck it down a cliff and then get on it and ride it. If you can't ride down the cliff, just throw it down and then go and ride it. So I'm going to continue with this bike this year. I'm going to recommend it to people that are looking for something that's big, burly, don't mind too much about the weight or the noise, because all the other pros far outweigh the cons. And I can't wait to spend the spring and the summer riding this as much as possible and spending more time on this bike. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more e-bike content, and I'll catch you soon.